There we go. Could you confirm, Pam, that you can see the slides?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much for having me along and coming along today. My name is Lorna Gibson. I'm Programme Manager at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and I have a responsibility for Code Club in Scotland. So if you're looking for me on Twitter, then it's at Code Club Scot. And if you're looking to email me, then it's scotland@codeclub.org. So I am Scotland. Today, I'm going to do two things. So it's called Getting Started with Code Club, and I'm definitely going to give you an overview on what Code Club is and how it works, in case you're interested. I'm also going to give you a whistle-stop tour of some of the other free things that are available through the Raspberry Pi Foundation, just in case any of those things resonate with you and are interesting. So I'm going to do those two things. And don't worry about taking down notes or links. As Pam's already said, it's going to be recorded, but I'll also share out my slides so you can get easy access to the links. So I'm going to talk about Code Club. I'm going to talk about all the free projects that are available, and then other useful bits and pieces that I think are interesting, and some of them may spark a light with you guys as well. So Code Club is a global network of coding clubs for young people, primarily targeted at 9 to 13. The Code Club model is very flexible. So while predominantly in primary schools, these clubs happen, kind of P5 to P7, there is no hard and fast rule. So I know clubs that have young people in primary 4, not so much younger than that, but primary 4 is certainly doing Code Club. And then obviously there's some of the early years in secondary where they might have access to Code Club as well. And really the primary aim is to just inspire the next generation, all these young people, to be excited about computing, to be excited about digital making, and to realise that the device that they're holding in their hand, if it's their phone, or the computer that they're sitting behind, is something that is not just a passive experience, that it can be active and creative, and they can make and change and design things that they enjoy or that are good for the environment or the world around them. So we are part of the Raspberry Pi Foundation. So Raspberry Pi Foundation Code Club is one of the largest programs in the foundation. Raspberry Pi, if you don't know what that is the little microcomputer you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. And it's about the size of a credit card, and it's a small credit card size machine that's essentially a computer for about £35. Code Club is device agnostic, so you do not need to have a Raspberry Pi to set up a Code Club. You need some form of device in your classrooms, such as a laptop, tablet, or a PC computer that can access the internet ideally, because that's where the projects are. But yeah, that's what you need. You can certainly, if you have Raspberry Pis, you can certainly use them, but you don't need to. But we are part of the Raspberry Pi Foundation because the money that is made from selling these devices funds our mission in terms of growing the number of young people that would get excited and experiment with computing. Oh, don't press that button. So, what do we know about Code Club? I don't want that slide. So what do we know about coding? So normally, if I was doing this as face-to-face training, I would, or certainly if I was in front of a group of children or young learners, I would talk about the fact that essentially computers are stupid. Now that's normally gets a good number of guffaws from young people because, they're sitting there with these magical computers that can do all sorts of things, and they might have gaming devices at home and you can play really sophisticated machines. But actually computers are essentially stupid because all they do is follow instructions. And at the moment, they don't write those instructions, although artificial intelligence may have a different future for us. But at the moment, it is a human that writes those instructions that allows the computer to do those amazing things that wow and amaze us. And they have to follow those instructions absolutely to the letter and exactly as we give them. So some of you may have come across the physical coding thing that you can do in a classroom. Sometimes it's called home robot, sometimes it's called the jam sandwich algorithm, and it's a really great way to introduce early algorithms, early coding. It's also a great way to think about the precision in the language that you use when you're giving instructions. But imagine teachers standing at the front of the class with the various things in front of them to make a jam sandwich, and the children have to give the instructions on how to do it. But the teacher takes everything absolutely literally. So literally, sorry, I have no English language today. So if the young person says, put the butter on the bread, the teacher would pick up the whole tub of butter and sit it on top of the whole loaf of bread. And the young learners would then think about, well, okay, so take out a slice of bread and lie it down and be more specific. And it's a great way of thinking about the language you use, how clear your instructions need to have. And it's a wonderful introduction to the fact that that's essentially how computers work. They have a very clear set of instructions, which are called algorithms. So often, and something you might like to try with a class is if you put people in pairs, you get one of the people in the pair to draw a shape and ask them not to draw a typical shape. So they can't draw a square or a rectangle or a circle, something that has a name, but draw a shape that's a combination of things. And they hide that from their partner, and then they have to describe their shape so that their partner is able to draw it. And during that process, obviously, they have to, they look over and go, no, okay, you want to, okay, now draw the line that is 3 centimeters, because at first they said draw a line and the person's line was too long. And they start to think about, angles and turning and, directional language and stuff like that. And then you tell them afterwards during that process, and what they were doing in giving instructions was an algorithm. And as far as my experience, lots and lots of young learners love that word. So they love the word algorithm. It definitely does not have enough vowels to support that many consonants. It sounds funny on their tongue. And in my experience of my own code club, sometimes when there's a wee bit of chatter going on in the corner and I pop my head round and find out what's going on, the response is, oh, we're just thinking about good algorithms. Of which I give them a nice wry smile, but good use of the word. Always brownie points for that. So essentially, computers just take a series of very specific set of instructions, these algorithms, and they just write them. You write them up in different languages. So there's lots and lots of different languages, some of which you might have heard of. What we start off with in Code Club, or what we always suggest starting off with, is something called Scratch, which is made by the lovely folk in MIT in the States. And it's a simple drag and drop, click together kind of Lego style coding language. So all the bricks are already there, and you're just putting them and assembling them in the order that you want to get coding. So unlike when I learned to code, where it was all text-based, and if you missed some grammar or you made a bit of a typo, nothing ever worked, and you had to go through it painstakingly doing a kind of spot the difference. When you start to learn to code nowadays, you can drag and drop, click together, and make something that's functioning and rewarding really quite quickly. So there's a real quick high return. It may not do exactly what you want in the expected order, and there's always the problem solving of moving the blocks around, but you don't have that it's broken before you've even got started, which is amazing. Scratch is also free, so as I said, and it's been designed specifically for young people. And depending on guidance within your local authority, the other good thing about Scratch, if you use the online version, is you can set up a teacher account, which allows you to make some class accounts and have some control over them being able to save online. If you can't do that within your local authority, then it's very easy for them to save to OneDrives or a school drive and stuff like that. So just, it can be used in most circumstances. I've not come across anywhere, but we haven't been able to use that. I'm just going to leave that link there, and you can watch it later if you want. It's just a video we did a couple of years ago, which is just about Code Club in Scotland. You see some young people, so you get a flavour of what a Code Club might look like. There's a couple of short interviews. It's a very short film, but a couple of interviews with some people who are teachers and volunteers supporting Code Club and how they feel about it, which is quite a nice video, but I'm not going to play that for now. So essentially, this is the algorithm, for want of an expression, for a Code Club. So there's always an educator involved because it's in a school venue normally. We provide a whole load of free projects which are accessible for you to use. You sprinkle in a few children, and again, the model is very flexible, so it depends on what you're comfortable with. So some people start out small and go from there. Some people will take the whole class to do a Code Club. Sometimes it does depend on access to devices and stuff like that. So there's nothing prescriptive. And you mix them all together, and that is essentially a Code Club. I'm going to show you the projects in a minute, which will probably give you a little bit more of a flavour. But as I said earlier on, there is no particular equipment that you need to have to run a club. So if you've got PCs, laptops in your school, tablets, Raspberry Pis, whatever devices you have access to that allow you to go online, those will work for Code Club, because we are served just by a couple of websites. So yeah, there shouldn't be any barriers there. If you use an offline version of Scratch, that also works. You don't have to use the online version. So if you've got that installed on desktops and stuff like that, that's all absolutely fine as well. I realise in my sharing thing, I can't see if there's any questions. So what I might do is stop every now and again, or maybe Pam can shout out if I need to stop at any point. So, I'll happily take questions at the end, but also if anybody does need to ask a question before then or wants to interrupt, I'm completely flexible. Okay, perfect. So as I said, Code Club is completely free. So the projects are free. Signing up, there's no cost incurred in a Code Club at all, on the proviso that you also provide that for free. If there are circumstances where there are some overheads incurred, then our terms changed a couple of years ago. So you can make a nominal charge if it's just to cover overheads and stuff like that, as long as you try and make what's the word I'm trying to say? Make sure that that's not a barrier to somebody attending. So, making sure that there are some free places available for people who potentially couldn't pay that fee but are keen to come along. But normally they're free to attend. Clubs take place typically as an after-school club. We have lunchtime clubs. We've got some breakfast clubs. We have clubs happening at all sorts of different points within the calendar, and it's just a fun, informal space where young people collaborate, work through the projects that are very well scaffolded, and make and create and do some amazing digital things. When you sign up with Code Club, you can go in and access the club organizer pack, which is full of all sorts of resources like posters to advertise your club, parent permission letters. There's a whole guide to top tips and tricks from people who have set up clubs in the past, things to think about. And there's even some offline activities, which are good to have squirreled up your sleeve for those days where suddenly the internet's gone down and lo and behold, what are we going to get up to, because everybody's got to hang after school for an hour. Which has happened a few times in my club. And then there's all sorts of additional resources available for clubs also when they're registered. So we have a whole series of certificates, so you can celebrate achievements, you can celebrate finishing modules and groups of projects, or just if you want to celebrate someone who's really found it tricky and really tried hard, There's all sorts of certificates in there. We've got a series of great posters based on computing science language and vocabulary and breaking those down, which are very well received because digital is very hard to put on the walls, and every single primary classroom or even school classroom that I've been into always have amazing, engaging, bright, interesting walls. So these posters might be useful. And then there's templates and letters for sending out to parents and all sorts of other bits and pieces in there. And then there's a series of new things which we've recently released, which I think I'm coming up to on my slides now, but let's surprise myself. I'm not coming to those just yet. So let me tell you a little bit about the projects. So what's interesting about now is we've got all the original projects, all the Code Club projects. They're still there. They've always been much beloved by the community, and they will remain there for the time being. But some work has taken place during the pandemic. It started before the pandemic, but carried on a little bit longer because it was harder to get access to contributions from teachers. They have been doing a lot of work in the learning team at Raspberry Pi on some new learning paths. So they've been really looking at the pedagogy around learning in terms of digital. They've produced these new paths that they hope stimulate independent creativity when it comes to digital making earlier than previously happened. And they have been released. They've been probably out in the wild since early October, I think, was when they were released. And they will be doing all sorts of work, tweaking them and improving them and things like that. So basically, there's these other projects available too. So you can start with, I'd rather just start with the ones that that have been around for a while and they look like they suit me. Or you could look at these new learning paths and go, actually, I quite like the way they're looking. Or you can do mix and match. And then I'll also tell you a little bit about some of the themed content and collections. So it's probably better if I show you. So the core Code Club projects are on the Code Club project site. Now, under Scratch, so most people start with Scratch. I think it says 38 projects there. There's 3 lots of 6 projects. So a module typically had 6 projects in it. So Scratch 1, Scratch 2, Scratch 3, and they progressively introduced more and more complex coding things. So, first project is pretty much about some movement and, making some basic controls. We're not going on to anything particularly complicated, but as the projects progress, they get more and more, they introduce more and more of the computing science concepts that people would need to use, such as, if statements by checking, well, if the health is at 0, then the character needs to stop because essentially the character has no health left, so is probably no longer with us. Or if the points get above, if you catch, the ball that needs to be caught, then you have your score goes up by 5. So all of those slightly more complicated things get introduced as you progress through. And then there's a series of other projects in and amongst there that have been contributed from the community, or they're themed around the Olympics or World Cup or Internet Safety Day. There's some bits and pieces in there. Now, some clubs will do Scratch and only Scratch, and that will be the projects they do. They won't progress on from that. That's absolutely fine. That's where the comfort of the teacher and the young people are. Absolutely fine. And then some clubs will move on and try some other types of coding. So we have HTML and CSS. Again, there's 2 core modules there and some extra projects, and that's web programming. So that's making some web pages. We use at the moment a website called Trinket.io, which is similar to Scratch in terms of you've got the code on one pane and right next to it you've got the output, so you can see as you change your code what impact you're having on what people can see on your web page. We use Trinket also to do Python. So Python is a text-based language that's used in industry. People that The young learners often get quite a kick out of knowing that real people use this coding language to do all sorts of things. It's hard. It can be challenging to use Python because, as I was explaining before, when I first started out, it isn't forgiving. You have to type out, and if you miss the semicolon or you have made a typo when you've spelt something wrong, the computer won't know what to do with that. It gives lots of little helpful bits telling you where it's got to a problem, but actually, by the time they've built their confidence on general coding concepts on the earlier projects, once they come to Python, there's a great amount of problem solving and resilience and determination to spot the difference between, okay, that code there is working and my code isn't. So I'm going to spot what the difference is. And you often get those moments where it's like, oh, it was the semicolon. It's just like when the teacher says I should always have a full stop at the end of my sentence. So they get, that some of those things are just really important because the computer can't follow along. And then we've got a handful of other projects here that there's some on the Raspberry Pi. So if you specifically had a Raspberry Pi and wanted to look at the Sense Hat, is a little thing that sits on top of the Raspberry Pi that allows you to code lights and messages and pictures. You can do that within an emulator, so you don't actually even have to have the device. And Sonic Pi, which is coding music. And then further down on the sheet you can't see, we've also got a selection of projects if you have any microbits in your school. And we've got some nice physical computing ones. Those latter ones don't get used quite as much. Mostly people, I don't know, 70% maybe of clubs are working on Scratch things, and then some clubs doing some HTML and CSS and some doing Python and stuff like that. But we wanted to make sure that we provided people with enough options and opportunities to find things that ignite the excitement of the young people. We also have, I'll tell you about the two extra other ones in a second. So the projects are available online. They've got little sort of step-by-step, so they're broken down into chunks. The first thing that always happens is there's always a video that shows them what the learning intention is, so what they will be making. So they've got this kind of visual imprint that they can work towards. And then it's just a series of step-by-step instructions that take them through. Okay, is somebody going to say something? No. And then every now and again, there's these little challenge-based things. So if you've got someone who is absolutely devouring the worksheets, getting on brilliantly and stuff like that, there's these little challenge boxes that make them have to think a little bit more about, okay, well, you've got your game doing this. Now, how would you make it do this instead? They are printable, and if you do have any need for it, there's a good number of them are translated into quite a lot of different languages, just worth saying. There were two things that were released last year. Sorry, there is something on my desk that a child has left that keeps buzzing. I'm just going to have a look. I don't know what that is. So we have a Scratch project, which is a beginner Scratch project. So you can start this with no Scratch experience at all, brand new club. But we released 6 projects that are based around look after yourself. So they're kind of mindful, health and well-being type projects, which have gone down an absolute storm. So when I had a brand new group of people start my code club, which we were delivering remotely because I'm a parent at my school, so I can't go into school. I was delivering it remotely over Teams. We started with these projects, and I can tell you they went down an absolute storm, but we've had lots of great feedback. And if anybody took part in the COP Code Along that we did with Education Scotland over the last couple of weeks during COP26, and the Butterfly Garden might look quite familiar because that's where I stole that one from. So that's a great set of beginner projects around a theme. And then we also have, for people who are a little bit more who are not beginner anymore, have got some coding skills under the belt. We've got one around protecting the planet. So, you know, in and around all the UN green goals kind of work, which again, if you were part of any of the code-alongs, last week we did the Shave the Shark. We didn't shave the shark, that would be shocking. Save the Shark project, which was a lot of fun. So that's what's found in the core original projects. Now, let me tell you, one other thing about that. So one of the things that we have done in response to feedback from some teachers that we've been chatting to was we have also produced some themed collections. So back in the beginning of October, it was World Space Week. So we produced just basically a 2-page overview of here's, if you're celebrating World Space Week, here's some projects that you could consider, and demonstrating which ones were beginners, which ones were more advanced, which ones were using different languages. We did the same for the environment collection to be available in and around COP26, but also any other time you would be looking at the environment. And then this week we released a seasonal one for kind of fun seasonal type projects that you might want to do on the run up to that dreaded C word that we're not allowed to mention in classrooms for fear of people getting too excited. And I've just made my screen go fast again. And so, sorry about that. And the themed collections, they're not the most beautiful of things because we just wanted to turn around and get them out. But basically it is normally around 7 to 8 projects. I wonder if that says it on one of the sheets does. And it breaks them down by which ones are Scratch. And then there's always a link to somewhere that has all of the projects because we select the ones that we think are most relevant. And the link shares all of the projects that could come under that theme. So this was the space one. Okay, there we go. So there's about 7 to 8 on each project collection. They vary in difficulty, and then we link out to this wider repository that I told you about. And that has some more advanced ones on the wider repository, and it also has some physical computing ones if that's ever something that you want to look at. These were the code-alongs that we just did. So if you took part in them, thank you. What I was hoping to have by today, but I haven't managed to get, is we will be doing 2 further code-alongs early December on around seasonal. So there will be a beginners coding project that you could come along with your class and live code along with me doing the project. And there will also be a Confident Coders one, and you'll be welcome to join one, both, or none, but I just wanted to shout out. And once that information is available, I will make sure that I ping that message across to Pam so she can share it out. So just over the last 2 weeks when we did it, we had 235 schools all across Scotland take part, which was amazing because we were aiming for 30, so that was slightly more than the aim, and that was just sub 6,000 young people all coding at the same point and making their amazing projects and then sharing all their lovely pictures on Twitter, which did make me a little bit teary because I haven't been able to go into a school and see happy young people's faces behind computers for some time. And it was just so lovely to see, because in home learning, my children were never happy when I asked them to sit behind a computer and log into Teams and do things. So moving on to the new project paths, and I know this is a lot of information, which is why I want to make sure that you've got the links to explore these things. And then please, any questions today or even, as soon as we hang up, please do feel free to reach out because there is a lot to take in. But there is a blog there which describes all about how they built the pedagogy, what the plan is and the intention with the projects and with these new paths. So feel free to have a look at that if that's something you're interested in. But basically it is made around this model of explore, design and invent. So each module, I don't know what that noise is. There's going to be a small child in trouble later. It is there are 6 projects still within a core module, but what happens is they will have 3 projects at the start that are explore projects, and they are super scaffolded projects about introducing a specific set of skills that module is working on. So they have 3 projects like that. Then there's 2 projects which are called design projects, which are about practicing and developing those core skills that have been developed in those first projects. And then the final project is an invent project. So that's the really open-ended, a broad brief that is achievable with having done the projects prior to that. So they've got the skills, they've practiced the design amongst those skills, and then the invent is a chance for them to be creative and design something that is meaningful to them, that responds to that brief in the way that they did. So this is in response to the fact that some young learners, when they were going through the projects, would follow them absolutely to the letter, and if it said the monkey was floating in space, it was always a monkey that was floating in space. It had to be the monkey, and they just wanted to do everything exactly along those lines. But when there was more creative challenges later on, just struggled when the information wasn't quite as scaffolded. Although there was always young people who were like, I don't want a monkey in space, I want it to be a hippo, that's what I'm going to do, and that's absolutely fine. So in response to some feedback that they had and some observations and some work with some teachers, the learning team wanted to kind of see if we could introduce a cycle that encouraged that independence and that early creativity earlier in the project cycle, so that they could start to see how those skills that they've learned aren't fixed to that core project that they remember doing, that they could actually do what they want with those skills and be a bit more creative. But as I said, it's early days, so feel free to try them out, give some feedback. The team are always looking to chat to people, and there's feedback forms to fill in, but that's how those projects work. And I've already said everything on that side. Just because they're new projects, and sometimes that can feel a little bit strange for people who have already done Code Club and they were used to the old materials. My colleague Kat has made some crib sheets, some cheat sheets for the new projects. You don't need to use them, but they are there and free and available. And it basically just does a quick overview of this is this new module. In this project, this is what will happen, and these are the learning experiences that young people will have. They will be able to do X, Y, and Z. So it gives a little bit of overview, which some people might find helpful, some people not, but please just know that that's there. Okay. So that was my whistle-stop tour on Code Club. I don't know if unless anybody interrupts and asks a question now, I'm going to continue on and just give you a couple of other interesting things I want to flag, and then I'll come back to the screen where I can see the chat and you can ask me any questions that you might have.
No questions so far.
Perfect.
Keep going.
I will keep going. So other interesting things that might be useful to know about. So if you really are interested, there is a Code Club FutureLearn course. So if you know what FutureLearn is, it's one of those MOOCs, those massive online, I've totally forgotten what they stand for, but those massive online free learning experiences. It is free. It will tell you at the very end, like all the FutureLearn courses, if you want a certificate, you can pay 30 whatever pounds for a certificate. You don't need to get the certificate, so that's a complete optional. And it's a kind of flexible model. So, I think it's split over 3 weeks at 2 hours a week, but some people just sit down and have a look through. This is a really useful thing to know about if you would like to encourage parents to support a club at your school. So I'm a parent volunteer at my school, and the other parents that have supported the club over the years have always found it quite useful to just go off and do this little course that gives them a little bit of idea of what to expect at Code Club, what other people have done, ideas from the community, just different bits and pieces, and come into the club thinking, okay, I feel I feel a bit more confident about coming along and supporting that. They don't have to, but if you think that that's helpful, have a look at that. Raspberry Pi has a whole series of Future Learn courses, 30 odd the last time I looked. So if you are looking at other professional development things in and around computing, computing science, then there's all sorts of courses on there. So if you're interested in, the programming pedagogy in primary school, there's a course there. They're all free. If you wanted to think about, how do I would like to do some more physical computing with my primary age people, what can I find? So that I thought I'd added a link there, but the link's not there at the moment. But basically, if you go to Future Learn and search Raspberry Pi, the portal will come up of all the courses that they have. And again, they're all free. They're often kind of 3 or 4 weeks at 2 hours per week if you wanted to do it like that, but they run mostly all of the time, so you can just dip in and out and blitz through or pick out the bits and pieces that are of interest. But there's usually something in there that is interesting and relevant to most of the people that I've chatted to. The other thing that if you don't know about is something called Hello World. Which is, I'm looking around for my latest edition, but I think it's in my bag from traveling. Hello World is a free magazine that is written for educators by educators. It is free in the UK, free to get a physical copy delivered to you. You can obviously access a digital edition anytime you want, but if you wanted, you could sign up as educators within Scotland and within the UK to have a free edition, and it comes out 3 or 4 times a year, filled with articles and lesson plans and just all things to do with computing and digital making. So I know that lots of people do it in different ways. So sometimes, somebody will sign up for their school and put it in the staff room so they can share it out amongst teachers, or people will have their own copies because they're keen. A lot of primary 7 teachers who have it and then let the learners take them home and come back with their own proposals for things that they would like, the young people would like to do in class. The big thing I would like to shout out about Hello World, which might be on the next page, it is that they're always looking for content from real live educators. And I know that there is some really amazing stuff happening across Scotland, and I would love to see some more Scottish content. So I'm just going to put a little shout out there. And even if you think you're not thinking like you've been massively innovative, I bet you're doing some really amazing stuff that would be brilliant to share, or that you could come together with some of your colleagues and share what they're doing. And it could just be, here's a lesson plan of how I brought coding and maths and art together in this project. Or it could be, something more about an initiative that that's happening and being involved. And if you're a little bit put off about writing from a magazine article, the team are amazing. They give you a nice scaffolded kind of layout and will help write the thing if that helps you. So there's my secret plea for lots and lots more content sharing. How amazing computing and computing education is in Scotland. The other thing I'd like to shout out, I don't know anybody's come across, there is something called AstroPi, specifically thinking about the part of AstroPi called Mission Zero, which is open now until the end of March, I think, maybe about the 23rd of March, actually, off the top of my head. So basically, right now on the International Space Station, there are 3 Raspberry Pis there. And what happens every year, if you don't know about this, is young people, so the teacher can sign up for an account for free, and then young people in groups or individually will write a small bit of code. It's a really simple bit of Python code. There's a great worksheet that goes with it. It's very scaffolded. It helps check and make sure you've done everything, basically allowing the young person to write a message to the astronauts on the International Space Station and then use one of the sensors. So previously it's used the temperature sensor, and then based on the temperature sensor, told the astronauts, oh, it's quite warm or it's quite cold. And it runs what basically happens is you submit the code, all the code is checked, they then put it all on little flash drives, it gets sent to Kazakhstan, it goes up in an actual rocket when they're delivering a payload to the International Space Station, and then an astronaut will take the memory card and put it into the Raspberry Pi and will run the code, and then it records when and where the code runs. And then what happens later is they get sent back a wonderful certificate that tells them that their code ran in space, and it shows them where the International Space Station was when their code ran and what the date and time was that happened. And it's just, I think it's an amazing thing to be able to do. Space is so difficult to be tangible because it's far out there and we can't reach it, we can't touch it. But you know, when young people think that they've written some code and it's been sent and run in space, it makes for some great conversations when in the good old days when parents could come into open afternoons and stuff like that, when they can show off where it happens. But there's also some great conversations when they look at the map and then try and work out which country that is and learn all about different stands, was what happened when my particular class did it. So I've left the link there to have a look. You can take part in that if you want to. And so I will just summarize talking about Code Club. So Code Club, really easy to register. You don't need to know very much. We have implemented, so if you signed up a few years ago, there is a slight change now. So for every club, we need a safeguarding sponsor. Basically, that's just a secondary contact at the school that is either the head teacher, deputy head, child protection officer, you know, safeguarding lead, whatever you have. It's just a secondary contact so that it's part of our process to say how seriously we take safeguarding to the external auditors that we have. That person isn't subscribed to mailing lists. They're just there to say that, you know, they would help make sure that if there was a safeguarding issue specifically with that club, that they would support the person who's doing it. It's obviously slightly more important for community venues than schools, because schools have great safeguarding practice anyway, but as part of our charitable responsibilities, we've just made that as a kind of a catch-all. So it's just a secondary contact. So you put those details in, your club then gets verified. They just check that, you know, nobody's put any strange, unusual information in, that the school is actually legitimately a school. It's not somebody's house. And then you're able to log in and you can download all the club materials. You can go to the project site. I have to say the project site is free and open source, so that is available whether you have a code club or not. So, you know, you can use those projects within your classroom and that's absolutely fine. But with having a code club, you also get access to those other materials to help support running a club. If you wanted to build your confidence, I've already told you about the online training on FutureLearn, and then it's just about telling people that the club is there, and then you can go and get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out how to get this to stop sharing for a second, which was a bar at the top, but where's that gone? I'll do that little cross down there. Sorry, I have to talk through technology. There we go. So that is my whistle stop tour. I'm going to try and open the chat, but my screen is just switching over. Very open for any questions anybody has, whether they're related to Code Club or wider things, or whether you're just like, actually,